This is going to be like a part two to what I talked about in the previous video about the monolithic view in African American literature. In the previous video, I talked about most African American literature and art, usually especially most literature, comes from a white feminist, white liberal perspective. Um, the main reason why most of the books, if we look at most of the media that we watch today featuring African Americans, it is very, very gynocentric and very, very female oriented. And we have not ever seen the male perspective in media. I'm going to talk about why we need diversity in African American media and why it's important. Um, the, the media that we have today, it's really slanted, it's really one-sided, and it's really messing up boys and girls and the way they're being raised today. Um, I look at African American literature and what damage is done from this gynocentric view for the last 40 years. Um, we have little girls who have learned from books like Alice Walker's The Color Purple, Push from by the Sapphire, Waiting to Exhale. They've all learned that black men are no good, black men are evil, black men are not responsible, and black men are not leaders. They have learned that the black man is to be put into a place lower than a dog. He's supposed to be behind the children. Now, if we look at God's natural order, the man is supposed to be the leader. But in the black community, due to this gynocentric white feminist, which is really a white supremacist view, in most of the media that's presented to African Americans, the black man has been placed in a social hierarchy in a place below a dog. And this media that many African Americans are imbibing teaches girls to hate men, that men have no way of contributing to society, and that black men, have no value whatsoever outside of being a sexual tool or a financial tool. And this is in all media that people have imbibed over the last 40 years. We don't see the black man as a leader. We don't see him in most media as a family man. We don't see him as a provider or a protector. In many cases, we see him as a player, a joker, in some sort of irresponsible role. And that's due to this feminist perspective in media. And this is the damage that is done to young girls. On the other side of the spectrum, the damage done to young boys is it's created this nice guy syndrome where many boys grow up believing that they are going to be the exact opposite of these stereotypes presented in this media. So that's what some of them do. Others embrace the stereotypes as social norms, but many try to take on this nice guy, white knight role where they're going to be the good guy who is the opposite of this role. But what they really do become is two sides of the same coin. Because the nice guy is the opposite of the jerk. And when you imbibe too much of this media, you start thinking that I don't want to be this guy. I don't want to be this so-called monster. When really, this is all propaganda created by white supremacy to create a negative image of black men. And with most media that's been presented to people today, we're not getting that counterpoint. We're not getting the views from black men. And long term, this has really damaged the black community because people are only seeing this one side. This is what Oprah Winfrey and many other people promoted as what African American man is and what African American men are. And this one-sided view has been extremely detrimental to African Americans over the last 40 years. And you watch too much of this media, it does serious damage to you. And it's taught in the school systems, and it's been taught for the last 40 years in schools. These books like The Color Purple, The Rise of Watching God, the way that they're taught really makes black men, puts them in a negative light, and again, it promotes a white supremacist view of black men. That black men are inferior, black men are not responsible, black men are violent and lazy and shiftless, and this is what's on the African American fiction reading list in high school, in elementary schools, junior high schools, and colleges. And this is the social education that people are getting about black men. And sadly, in a lot of cases, there's nothing out there to counter this media, to refute many of these lies and propaganda, white supremacist propaganda, and white feminist propaganda presented in this media. There's no counterpoint because many publishers don't want to publish a counterpoint. A lot of publishers have this view that only women buy books and any book by a man would not sell. That's one of the things that one of the excuses they use to continue promoting this gynocentric view, this feminist view, white supremacist view in black literature and black media. And in black literature, it's very detrimental to, again, like I said before, to young children to learn this at an early age because you grow up learning to hate black men, and in many cases, a lot of people begin to learn how to hate themselves because of the way this literature is presented to them and interpreted to them in an academic environment. There is black media out there. It's self-published and published by small press publishers that counters a lot of these points. But in the mainstream media, this stuff is not promoted on a regular basis, and it's hard to get the word out about media that runs counter to these points. All of it is extremely detrimental, especially to small children, because they're learning no good man, no good niggers, your daddy is no good, and in a lot of cases we really need that male perspective to balance things out, and you really do need balance in media, and we haven't had that in 40 years. I look at most of the media that's being presented, even today with the Tyler Perry movies. That No Good Deed movie just came out. Again, very gynocentric, very feminist, very, very woman-oriented. And we don't get this objective view. And it's important to have an objective view because you need to see both sides and come up with your own conclusions. That's one of the things that I like about writing in revolving first-person perspective is that, because that's the way I write my fiction, is I use a revolving first-person perspective so that the reader can be like an observer and they can objectively come to their own conclusion regarding the action transpiring around them. You don't see that a lot. I mean, some writers may use it, but then everything is heavy. Like Terry Millen sometimes does it, but everything again is very heavily slanted. Like in Wait and Exhale, was very heavily slanted, and we didn't get the men's view to contrast what was transpiring and happening with the women. And all we got was the women's view of things. And from that view, we got a real victimized perspective of how these black women were being treated. But we never got an objective perspective. Because when I read Waiting to Exhale, and I took a look at it again a couple years ago, I began to see things differently. They always said that the women couldn't find a good man, but then I began examining the character of Savannah, Robin, Bernadine, and Gloria, and I came to a different understanding of why they were single. Like in the case of Robin, I came to understand that the reason why she was single is because she had serious character issues, and she was not someone she basically was committing adultery, and the same thing with Savannah. They were both committing adultery and with married men. So many men aren't going to marry a woman who is a cheater because if she cheats with him, she's going to cheat on you. And that's always been the rule with men. And when it came to Bernadine, I began to understand that she had some serious mental health issues, and that was one of the reasons probably why her husband left her. They wanted to make it look like it was just the white woman that was the reason. But looking at her behavior and her actions objectively, I began to understand that she had some mental health issues, um, and she had some severe insecurities and other issues that probably led to her husband leaving her. And Ms. McMillan, again, glossed over all this stuff and made it look like this guy was the bad guy. But we never got that objective perspective, and that kept the book from really becoming a literary lesson. And then with the Gloria character, she was a single mother, divorced single mother, and a lot of men aren't going to get involved with you when you're a single mother and you're divorced. There's a lot of baggage, a lot of headaches. Yeah, she did get a man at the end, but I don't think she. I think it really she got lucky. It really wasn't anything, but she really, again, she was a single mother. She was divorced. She was obese. And another thing that, while waiting to exhale, that I found was a big error that really showed the feminist slant was you have these women, black women, who are in Arizona saying that they can't find a good man. And that was one of the things that was overlooked. Is Arizona a mecca for black people? And that, again, plot hole right there. And if you're a critical thinker, you start going, this is Phoenix, Arizona. It's not really known as a mecca for black people. Now, if she was in Detroit and said that um, there was a shortage of educated black men, I could understand that. I could probably think and say, well, maybe that's possible. But here you are, you have women in Phoenix, Arizona, not exactly known for a heavy black population, saying that there's this shortage of black men. And the whole thing is that, again, from that gynocentric feminist view, we got this propaganda saying that there was this shortage of black men, of educated professional black men, when it never was the case. And this is why we do need a male perspective, and we do need a male counterpoint in media. But a lot of times publishers will give you the excuse that books by black men featuring black men don't sell. But I'm starting to believe that that's not true. I've always believed it wasn't true. Because now I'm seeing some of the numbers when I do my blog. I'm starting to see more and more African American men reading, because that was another thing that he used to tell me back when I was submitting my first book, Changing Soul. Back in the 90s, they were telling me that black men don't read. And here I am, I got 500,000 hits on my blog, and I've got I pretty much get regular black men coming to me regularly on Facebook and coming in the comment section. So black men do read, but it's how you present the information to them. And again, with a lot of the books that are out there on the market and a lot of media that's out here, everything is female-oriented, female perspective, and they think that the black female is the only one with the dollars. And there are plenty of black men out here who are educated, professional, who have dollars, and are looking for media and looking for literature to read and to watch. But no one wants to target that audience because again, a lot of white supremacy wants to see the black man at the bottom. They want to see him below the woman. They want to see him actually below the children and the pet animals. And when you look at a lot of our literature, it's very slanted, and it's all female oriented, and it's all towards one narrative. And when you have everything towards one narrative, you are missing out on a lot. You're missing out on a lot. Especially when you're a black person, when it comes to black culture, you're not getting a clear picture of black life in the black community. And we didn't get that picture. We haven't gotten that picture in 40 years. I mean, if you look at most of the literature in the books at Barnes & Noble bookstore, when I go to the Barnes & Noble or I go to a vendor table, everything is female-oriented, and everything follows this narrative of victimization and somebody doing this poor black woman wrong. And that was a key theme in the 1990s when black book market started to boom. You have this single, successful, well-educated black woman with a big job and a big career. She can't find a man, or she had a man and the man was doing her wrong, so she had to get rid of him, and now she's looking for another man. And everything is so subjective, and it's coloring the perceptions of black women about black men, and it's adding fuel to the fire for the gender war. And the more fuel that's added keeps black people from coming together, because that's what white supremacy really wants to do, and that's what this literature, this gynocentric and feminist view does, is it pushes the divide between African American men and African American women. It creates a he said, she said environment where no one is having a constructive discourse or communication about relationships. We get these book hustlers like Steve Harvey with these convoluted solutions, which really aren't solutions, because none of it is constructive, features constructive action. None of it comes from a historical context. Again, more when I read Steve Harvey's book. Again, very female oriented, very feminist oriented. He made a lot of excuses um, for black women. He came up with this illogical concept. The whole title, again, he says he's a Christian, but the title itself, act like a lady, think like a man. God never made a woman to think like a man. And again, he made a woman to think emotional so she could take care of the short-term needs, like managing the family and managing the home and taking care of the day-to-day. And he made men logical so they could think long-term and strategize, take care of the needs of the family over a period of years. And what Steve Harvey did in his book, he made a lot of excuses for women. He told a lot of lies. Again, he comes from the nice guy perspective of manhood in that silly book of his. It comes from the nice guy part of it. That's why a lot of people call him a simp, because he really does come from that nice guy perspective and that nice guy angle. And he makes everybody think that men just want sex and that men will do anything for sex, and that's not true at all. Men want relationships, and if you had an objective writer like myself in a prominent position, you would start seeing that more often. That's one of the things I'm trying to do promoting my work, is trying to get more of an objective perspective out there, and show you that men do want relationships, men do want companionship, and they want more. And just that men have standards for what they want in a relationship and what they want in a woman. That's not being presented in at the bookstores and in the black book market, because white supremacy does not want to show you that side of black manhood. They don't want to show you responsible, capable, educated, intelligent black men, especially black men who can write or black men who can express themselves articulately. They don't want that out there. They'll go and they'll take a Steve Harvey or Michael Baisden, they'll dress him up, and he'll come out with a convoluted solution. When, as I always put it, the solution is always in the Bible. I know that a lot of people aren't going to like that statement, but it's always been there. Man is the head of the family, man is the leader, and the woman is the helpmeet. And that's the way God intended families to be, as part of his natural order. But from this white feminist and gynocentric view, we get this whole view of black people that is completely dysfunctional, and the literature we have had over the last 40 years promotes this dysfunctional view of black families and black ideologies, like in the case of Terry McMillan's Wait and Exhale, or Alice Walker's The Color Purple. When you really think about The Color Purple, it's really a dysfunctional book. Every black man is presented as a monster, and every black man is presented as a deviant and a psycho. And that's not the case with black men. And that book really over the last 30 years has corrupted the minds. It was one of the ones that planted seeds in the minds of black women about this no good man. It reinforced the ideas. But what people didn't know was that Alice Walker, to, before before she got the color purple, she's married to a white man. One, and two, they don't know that right now she's a lesbian, and all of those things colored her view of black men, and that's one of the things that probably led to this book, this white supremacist propaganda being published and promoted. Because if you look at a lot of the black literature that is being promoted and sold in the African American community, a lot of it does follow themes of white supremacy. And one of the ways it's taught promotes the themes of white supremacy, like in the case of Their Eyes Were Watching God from Zora Neale Hurston. The book was completely misinterpreted and presented to make black men look like bad guys, when it really was about something totally different. It was really about the hubris of black women, um, and how they are brought low because of their own hubris. And it was also about how raising women without a man in their lives, um, does damage, and how they cannot function in a family environment, and how they can't build families. And also, it also talks about the impact of white supremacy, and racism long term on generation after generation of black women. Because if you look at how these women were conceived by white slave masters, and rapes and sexual violence, and how it damaged them, it had a huge impact on them. And then when the black men tried to have relationships with them, they couldn't have a function. Like when the black men tried to have let me clear my mind for a minute. When they tried to have relationships with Janie Crawford, they couldn't have relationships with her because she never had a true male figure. She never understood what it was to be a part of a functional, healthy relationship. So she didn't know how to do that because of that single mother, grandmother household, that female-headed household, which was created through sexual violence, from white racists. And this is a point that is never expressed or presented at colleges and universities. And it was one that I put on my blog, www.shawnisjames.blogspot.com. I also put it in an ebook on Kindle, a counter-analysis to Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. Again, you need that black male perspective to counter what you've been presented in American media. And we're not getting that in the mainstream. What we're getting is a lot of stuff that promotes victimization of black. Today, it's even worse than it was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we were getting just this pro-black power, pro-black woman stuff, but we're getting this victimization these days of black women. And we really need to balance these images out. We really need that male perspective, because what the male perspective is going to give you, not a hyper-masculine male view of things, but if you balance it out properly, you're going to get an objective understanding of what it means to be a black man in society, and what it means to be a black woman in society. And when you get that view, you can get a panoramic picture of black culture, black experience, and it'll help you gain a better understanding of what it means to be black and to have a black identity. One of the things I try to do when I'm publishing fiction is I try to remain objective. I try to be that guy who just tells the character stories, and this is in my fiction mostly. I try to be the guy who just tells the story and let the characters use their own voice, because I put it on paper, and I like the characters to talk in their own voices, and I want the reader to be the observer, and I want them to objectively come to their own observations and come to their own conclusions about what's going on in the story. And I want them to come to their own understanding about things. Because for me, it's important for people to think about things on their own and to come to a understanding about black people. Because I really, one of the things I try to do is I try to humanize black people in most of my work. I don't want it to go into stereotypes. I don't want it to go into ghetto drama. I really want people to relate to the characters I design and the stories that I tell. I want them to see the characters as people, and I want them to relate to them on a human level. And that, I feel, is not being done a lot of times with this monolithic, feminist, gynocentric view in African American literature and in African American media, where everything is pro woman, it's super feminist, and it really is. It really hurts males to see this type of stuff because it makes them feel left out. It makes them feel inferior, and it makes them feel insecure about their own male identity. And that's why a lot of males take on these hyper masculine identities, like this thug caricature, which is really a fusion of the coon and the brute caricatures from Jim Crow, and it doesn't give you that balance. You really need that balance so you can understand how to be a healthy man and a healthy woman. Because again, Superwoman, that's another thing, another new age caricature that has really damaged black women as I look at it, and damaged their psyche. On this other one, the victim is really messed because it doesn't really help you survive in a world where you're going to have to do things, you're going to have to survive, and you're going to have to do things on your own. And you're going to have to solve problems and become a critical thinker. And this type of media really is detrimental to black people. And I make every effort in my publications to try to give people that balance, to give people that understanding, give people that different view of black people. I really want to make people understand that black people are great people. We have our own culture, we have our own art, we have our own history. And when you see all of the art, all of the culture, and all of the history, you see what's great about being a black person. And again, even when I'm writing female characters and I'm doing a female-centered story, I try to remain objective and I try to give you an understanding of things from an objective perspective. I really want my readers to think, and we're not getting. And because I looked at a lot of books in my 20s when I was going to the Barnes and Noble, and looking at different books during this Black book craze, and when I decided to start my writing career, I really wanted readers to have something different. I wanted them to have something unique and something out of the box. And I really wanted to get out of this gynocentric viewpoint. As I've gotten older, I've started to understand the long-term damage reading these type of books does to people, and having this one-sided view does to people, because it really prevents people from having black people from having healthy, functional relationships with one another. Because when you read this type of stuff and you keep hearing no good man, no good man, no good nigger, niggers, I hate expletive, it tells you, hey, I don't have to respect black men. Black men are nobody. I don't have to see them as human beings. And it leads to black women dehumanizing black men. It leads to black women not seeing a black man as a respected authority figure, as the way God intended for him to be seen, as someone who is lovable, as someone who is caring, as someone who is sensitive, as someone who can have a constructive and healthy relationship. And again, that is by design, and that's why you have to be, I always say, you are what you're reading. You have to be very careful about the media you imbibe, because long term it does become a part of you, and it becomes a part of your psyche and a part of your mind, and you start projecting these ideas that you have learned. And that's why it's important for you to learn the right types of ideas. And that's one of the reasons why I started doing research behind all of these books and stuff, because I started seeing in family members this self-hate, this insecurity. I mean, because you read too much of this stuff, you watch too many of these shows like Oprah Winfrey and all this stuff, and it takes a wrecking ball to your mind. And you have to really, because I was a TV junkie since I was 7 years old, but then I began, as I became a teenager, I started really looking at the media that was presented to me and really putting it through a lens. And as I got into my 20s and my 30s, I really started creating my own content. I really started realizing I had to be careful about the messages I put out there, the content I produced, because I could either be part of the problem or I could be part of the solution. And as my mission as a writer and a publisher is to create positive stories about the African American experience, I wanted to be part of the solution, and I wanted to present a balanced, objective picture of African Americans, and I wanted to present a humanized picture of African Americans that would help people long term, so that when they looked at this media and they read these stories, they took a look at themselves and they saw something human. They saw something good about themselves, and it wasn't something that led to further divides like this gender war we have right now, which I feel is being reinforced by the miseducation black people are getting in public schools and in colleges when it comes to African American literature. Because in the 70s, a lot of these people were feminists who came into the academia, and a lot of the men were feminists as well. A lot of the black male professors were feminists as well. And they're afraid to, and some guys are just afraid to teach from the male perspective. I know I'm going on a lot of different points here, but there's a lot of things I want to talk about in this video, because this is a topic that I feel is very important for black people to understand about how they're educated and how they're miseducated, and why we need this other view. And we really need more people to start writing in this view. We need more black men to start writing and publishing books, and we really need more black men to start producing media. I know that there are some out there. I know there's a lot of great filmmakers out there, a lot of great producers out there, but we need more content from the male perspective. We need to really balance this out, because this one-sided view of black media is killing us. It truly is killing us. It's keeping the black community from growing. It's leading to this regression, and it's preventing a constructive discussion about black issues. That's all I have to say for this video. I know this is a long one, but this was one that I really wanted to make, and I really wanted to talk about these issues. So please comment, rate, and subscribe.